Hello, my name is Russell Katz, and today I will be doing the introduction for our Management 1001 case study on coal seam gas. So, recently there's been a lot of concerns regarding the environmental issues surrounding greenhouse gas emissions. And a lot of people are looking for a way to solve climate change while also meaning that we don't bankrupt the economy. And one of the popular ways that people have been looking for that is coal seam gas. Now, coal seam gas is a form of natural gas and has been hailed as an environmentally conscious and incredibly economically efficient means of burning fuels while also having pretty much zero greenhouse gas emissions while being burned. Now, the issues surrounding coal seam gas are many because numerous people have pointed out that while burning it is not really an issue, the process of extracting it is where the environmental catastrophe lies. Coal seam gas is one of the popular ways to extract coal seam gas is through a process called hydraulic fracking. Now, hydraulic fracking is when you take significant amounts of water and at an incredibly high pressure you force it down a shaft that has been drilled, and in the case of coal seam gas, it hits the rock and fractures it, which then releases the gas. This water, though, isn't just water, it's also mixed with fracking chemicals and sand, which creates a toxic waste product. Now, there are numerous safety measures that must be taken into account when using hydraulic fracking. And a lot of times, and in past situations, not all of these safety measures have been taken into account. For example, if the concrete that is used to make the well is fractured due to the high pressure, then the natural gas itself can be released into the water table. And there's been numerous situations where this has happened in countries like the United States. This can be catastrophic from an environmental sense and has a very simple solution, though, of just maintaining safety checks and proper maintenance. Additionally, there have been no long-term independent studies surrounding the use of hydraulic fracking because you have to keep in mind it is incredibly high pressure that is being used. So it is causing a fracture, and there have been some people who think that it might cause earthquakes. That theory has been it's hotly debated right now. The other things that people are concerned about is potential leakage and when it comes to storing the waste product. Currently, the Australian government is paid so that these companies can bury it underground. However, there are concerns about the waste being leaked due to the fact that this waste is highly toxic to not only the water table but also just the soil in general, and any potential runoff. There has to be incredibly safe measures, and as I said before, there have been no long-term studies to determine the impact.
So one of the main issues that coal seam gas does have is around the environment. So small pockets of energy-rich gas found within coal seam fracture lines, hundreds of meters under the earth, come at a giant expense to mining companies that harvest them. The expense also appears to include the environments that accommodate these gas deposits. These mining magnates, in pursuit of CSG, are facing many environmental issues. Certain governments, including Queensland State Government, enforce a strict set of laws that protect both heritage and environmental sustainability. One section involves the leadership, planning and control of CSG. Communities have raised concerns that the projects may have major environmental and social impacts, as large CSG development poses health risks to the community. Consequently, there is the potential for long-term impacts on rural communities and the chance that public health can be affected indirectly or directly through contaminated soil, air, or water. During these unclear times, the management team will call for the involvement for professions to be allocated to specific workers in order to cover a range of responsibilities that are needed to apply if sustainable decisions are to be made. Another section is the strategic management of CSG. They currently do operate using Another section is the strategic management. They currently are using wells dug hundreds of meters into the ground surface to reach pockets of gas. In order to achieve this goal, large drills are used to bore to the Earth's surface. In order to keep the drills cool, large deposits of toxic water are pumped into the drill wells. The strategic management idea raises concerns for CSG, as it impacts environmental ecosystems and causing groundwater contamination. The CSG industry offers sustainable economic benefits to Australia. Appropriate management and regulation can minimise any potential adverse impacts on surface and groundwater systems and air quality arising from emissions. However, CSG mining may risk other important natural sources. This includes fertile agricultural land, water supplies, and a safe and pleasant countryside. CSG needs to be careful in regards to how damaging this can be on the country. One of the most important parts is the social responsibility and the ethics of CSG. It is a thriving industry across the globe, and with less greenhouse gas emissions and less risk of climate change, CSG has been widely promoted as a cleaner substitute to coal. However, recent studies have cast doubt on this claim, stating that CSG may just be an obstacle to a cleaner energy future rather than a bridge towards it. This doubt places many ethical and social responsibilities on CSG mining and organisations.
Ethics can be defined as the code of moral attitudes that set the criteria for what is seen as right and wrong in how a person conducts themselves. This then guides the behaviour of that person or group. Coal seam gas is widely becoming known as a cleaner form of energy when compared with coal. Companies that have adopted the coal seam gas as a source of energy, either by using or providing it, are choosing the moral rights approach when it comes to ethics. This is because coal seam gas produces less greenhouse gas emission, which in turn does not encourage climate change. Companies that are harvesting the gas also need to be mindful of ethical dilemmas when it comes to harming the environment in order to reach the coal seam gases. While it is heavily regulated by governments, some companies still go outside of their ethical boundaries in order to make a profit. Sustainable development involves meeting the needs and demands of the present generation without jeopardizing the ability to meet the needs of future generations. This definition views sustainability in three aspects: environmental, social, and economic processes. Through the use of careful planning and controlling, companies that are harvesting the coal seam gas will be able to ensure that their work is not having a detrimental effect on the environment. This may include the effects on future generations, but also those in current generations. As the coal seam gas industry continues to grow, so too does the possibility of health and environmental risks. Ensuring that the necessary actions have been taken in order to minimise the risk of water, soil, and air contamination is essential in preserving the health of individuals as well as the environment for the future.
The case has disclosed that coal seam gas industry has been disturbing the groundwater system, hence posing a potential risk to irrigators, specifically in Australia. Management team in coal seam gas need to come up with a preemptive supervisory framework for studier consideration on a cumulative risk management in order to adequately address workable water management, development concerns, irrigated agriculture. In addition to this, the idea of entrenching a risk valuation approach to address cumulative effect at strategic local scale crucial, since it will reinforce the supervisory framework and offer substantial profits. The presence that the management team of coal seam gas facing numerous challenge due data knowledge, environment, culture, and social effect, as reflected in the case coal seam gas mining in Australia is a ground non-renewable energy industry that affect water and air quality, social health, and landscape. It's clear that adaptive management does not validate by just responding the transaction, uh, information has become easy to alter. Decisions such as understanding of adaptive management in normally misinterpreted, particularly where adverse impact in groundwater system might be arable or situation in which there is massive lag period existing between the coal seam gas mining and majoring advisors. It is clear that policymakers in Australia have a chance to lead the path by herons political strength from the present coal seam gas debate, so as to reformulating and international cumulative risk management that involves mining activities as well as other large scale processing in water and land country.
Objectives to solve problems and the future directions of coal seam gas. Coal seam gas, also known as CSG, is a controversial gas and fuel source sourced from the coal seam deposits located between 300 and 1,000 metres below the Earth's surface. Although this gas is a great alternative to coal and also has environmental benefits to the alternative, it's clear that further research into its implementation needs to be done. Coal seam gas is currently the next best thing to coal, also coming with a range of environmentally friendly attributes. The gas has been described as a stepping stone rather than a bridge to the next alternative fuel source for the world. With this in mind, changes need to be made in order for there to be a future in this industry. As there is currently a deal for coal seam gas to bring $100 billion into the Australian economy over the next 20 years, it is clear why the government wants to push for the collection and installation of these taps, but ethical standards need to come into place. The farmers need to be considered, and also the current and future generations of the people living in Australia. Currently, invasive actions are taking place, such as going onto farmers' properties and placing these taps into the ground to receive and collect the gas. Some of these farmers are for the idea, as it gives them an inflow of cash through royalties that are off the farm, but for some of the farmers located in very fertile regions of Australia, where there is rich black soil and some of the biggest artesian basins in the world, places like Liverpool Plains and Cecil Plains, farmers are up in arms that the possible contamination of the soil and aquifers are highly likely. As this comes with constant risk of soil and water contamination, actions need to be taken to ensure the risks are minimised. As there is no direct solution for these problems, as there is always going to be a group of people unsatisfied, more study and research needs to be conducted to ensure no or minimal contamination is taking place, whether that is due to fracking or surface spillages. If no guidelines are set and met, there is potentially catastrophic repercussions. Furthermore, research needs to be done for the placement of the taps. As Australia is home to some of the most rich and fertile farming land, certain parts of land shouldn't be touched by any means, as the risk is not worth it. In order for there to be a future in coal seam gas, these conditions need to be met, as the risk of failure and destruction of the environment is too high. Government groups and environmental representatives need to discuss the coming steps into the growing industry. As there is currently a high demand for the energy source, these representatives need to brainstorm, set in place and oversee new processes to ensure that they are working to bring in money for the Australian economy, but also protect the environment.
Planning is the process of setting objectives and determining how to accomplish them. It involves deciding what needs to happen and the best way to approach it. In order to move forward and indicate future directions which arise in the coal seam gas mining industry, we must first develop a timed action plan to address these identified problems. One of the main issues which have arisen as a result of the development of coal seam gas mining include the destruction of the environment and more specifically the contamination of water sources. Hydraulic fracking involves the pumping of water mixed with chemicals and sand into shafts in the ground to fracture the rocks and release the coal seam gas. The issue with hydraulic fracking is the water contamination and leakages resulting from the fracking itself. The leakages often come from the surface, with leakages from trucks and other spillages. The cement tubes implemented into the ground also have the potential to crack, which allows the contaminated water to seep through into the aquifers. As a result, this contaminated water destroys nearby farmers' crops and land and causes many other issues for the natural environment and surrounding population. The following timed action plan has been developed to approach this issue of water contamination due to hydraulic fracking. The first step is to meet with concerned parties and citizens in a public forum to discuss any issues relating to water contamination. This includes people from the community, government departments, the private sector and environmental advisors and should take around 1 month to organise. The second step is to conduct a secondary report and research into hydraulic fracking and further investigate the issues discussed by citizens and significant groups. This would take around 3 months to conduct and should be conducted by an independent third party, for example the Hawkeye Institute for the Environment. This report would be undertaken to further advance an understanding of hydraulic fracking and the extent to which the water is contaminated. The third step is to investigate similar coal seam gas operations elsewhere and how they are tackling the problem with water contamination. This would take approximately 2 months and would be conducted by APPEA, the Australian Petroleum Production and Exploration Association. This would be a use of the Vroom-Jaeger leader participation model, which is designed to help a leader choose the method of decision-making that best fits the nature of the problem being faced. The fourth step is to organise another meeting with concerned parties to discuss the progress of the investigation, and devise a plan for future actions. This would be conducted within the first 5 months of the investigation. Again, this step would involve community groups, government departments, the private sector, environmental advisors, and is used as a planning tool to forecast and predict the future directions. The fifth step is to revisit the exclusionary zones for coal seam gas mining and would be undertaken at the end of the first 6 months by the New South Wales Government in the Planning and Infrastructure Department. The sixth step is to apply stricter safety precautions to water leakages on the surface due to trucks and other transportation incidences. This should occur within the first 7 months as a form of scenario planning and contingency planning. This would be conducted by the New South Wales Government and also APPEA. The seventh step would be to attempt to fix or redesign the cement cracks which would result in the tubes underground evidently affecting the aquifers. This should be conducted within the first 9 months of the project beginning and be undertaken by New South Wales Government, APPEA and the National Harmonised Framework, SCER 2013, cohesively. The 8th and 9th steps are to revisit the project and evaluate the outcomes made to coal seam gas mining about the water contamination issue. This would be done for quality control and to check the progress of the water contamination issue. If there has not been significant progress since the beginning of the project, devise another action plan to further better the situation. This would be using Drucker's old-fashioned leadership which aims to establish new goals, priorities and standards.